Hi, and welcome to Tech Leader TV. I'm your host, John Thomas Flynn, and this show marks the beginning of our 9th season of Tech Leader TV. 9 years, you believe it? We continue with a stellar lineup of topics and guests, the show that everyone's talking about, a live streaming video webcast and cable television program focusing on public sector information technology and the political landscape. We come to you today courtesy of our sponsors, Unisys, LexisNexis, Xerox, Optum Government Solutions, Nexus, a Dimension data company, Veeam, Comcast, Microsoft, Tanium, Kronos, Information Builders, and Absolute Software. And finally, Flynn Associates, a California certified small business enterprise and trusted advisor for strategic IT business development, marketing, and solution services. And thanks for watching. The Tech Leader TV website continues to set new audience records. We're reaching thousands of state IT decision makers and vendor partners who recorded 250,000 page views last month alone, 250,000 last month alone. And we have a very special program today. Our guest is California State Auditor Elaine Howle, one of the state's premier watchdogs, looking over the performance of state government operations, including the state's IT investment and management, our favorite topic. This is the first appearance of the state's auditor on Tech Leader TV, and we have a lot of information, a lot to cover. In addition to the office's organizational and audit protocols, we want to delve a little deeper into some of the state auditor's recent reports. Let me just say right up front that their titles are provocative, just the way we like it on Tech Leader TV. First, there's the high-risk update on everyone's favorite topic, cybersecurity. Then there's the high-risk update on the California Department of Technology's challenges overseeing state technology projects. And here's one of my favorites, data reliability. State agencies' computer-generated data varied in their completeness and accuracy. Uh-oh. Plus, there are reports on fiscal implementation, the troubling Breeze licensing system. There's even a report on the auditor's investigation of improper activities by state agencies and employees. And finally, we even get a peek into the next targets for state audit review in the coming months. That should make your day, huh? Well, as usual on Tech Leader TV, we're going to continue to do the best to keep the spotlight on the state's management of its annual multi-billion-dollar IT investment to make government more efficient, more effective, and secure. And hopefully we'll have a little fun and keep your interest at the same time. Our motto is simple. As I like to say, California can always do better. Let's begin the journey now with our discussion on technology, politics, other unnatural acts. I'll be right back with our guests in just a moment, and we'll begin. Hi, and welcome back to Tech Leader TV. As I mentioned, our guest today is the State Auditor, Elaine Howle. She serves the state of California by providing accurate, unbiased, and timely assessments of financial operations and other aspects of state and local government entities. She began her career in state service back in 1983 and was appointed the State Auditor in the year 2000. Elaine Howle, welcome to Tech Leader TV.
Glad to
have
be
you.
here.
First State Auditor. We're very excited about that. Interesting enough, the State Auditor hails from my old stomping grounds in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, West Springfield.
Right, West Springfield.
The other side of the state. I was more on the coastal end. Right. And very interesting. How did you end up back in? Did you come here just for graduate school?
Actually, I came to California. My brother was the first of the family members to come out to California. He came out here back in the 70s and got my parents to come out in the dead of winter in Massachusetts. It was 6-8 feet of snow. My dad came out here. My brother took him golfing at Pebble Beach, and that was the end of it. They came back to Massachusetts and said, once you graduate from UMass, we're heading west. So that's how we got to California.
I have a similar story, a little bit different than that. I didn't get to Pebble Beach, but you know what was interesting? I did see you were in sports management before you went into get your MBA. And I believe you were on was it the softball team?
Right. I actually played softball from when I was a young kid.
Were you a pitcher?
No, I played third base, played the hot corner, and played all the way through college. In college, played in the Women's College World Series. And then when I came to California, I actually played one summer for a women's pro team in San Jose. So,
No kidding.
Yeah.
Because I looked at the. By the way, the nickname of the University of Massachusetts is the Minutemen, which I can't believe, being in Amherst, that they still keep that name.
Yeah.
But they didn't call it Minute Women or anything. Did
No,
it? Still Minutemen?
no, it was Minutemen, right?
Yeah.
So.
This is Amherst. It's like Berkeley, you know. It's a very
Great place to go to
very
school,
progressive.
though.
It is.
Yeah,
I almost went
UMass
to
is a
Amherst
great place to go.
College.
Yeah.
Except they didn't allow Irish Catholics in back then. I was afraid. You know what though? You know when I looked you up, it said that you had an earned run average of 0.00, and I said it must have been a pitcher, but playing third base, no wonder it was 0.00, huh?
Yeah. No, I don't know where that came from. I
hot
played
corner,
third base my entire. Even when I was a kid, I played either shortstop or third, and in college I played third base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got your you became a certified public accountant, right?
Right. When I joined, I came out to California, and I did pursue a master's degree at Cal State Sacramento. And then once I graduated from Sac State, I was looking for work, and my dream job, of course, with sport management degree was either to work in professional sports or to work for a major university in the athletic program. So I got the business degree to kind of partner my sport management degree, and actually looked around for some work and wasn't very successful in trying to break in. This was back in the 82 is when I graduated from Sac State. So, in talking with my brother, it's like, I got to do something. I've got to find a job. So I started looking at different state agencies and state operations, and my brother recommended that I apply at the Auditor General. And of course, you know, who grows up and wants to be an auditor? Nobody. What does an auditor do? So I researched it and applied for a position, and was fortunate enough to get hired on by the auditor's office back in 1983, and I've been there ever since.
Yeah, it is interesting. As I mentioned to you earlier, after I got my MBA, during getting my MBA at American University in D.C., I worked for the Pentagon at the Defense Contract Audit Agencies,
Right.
and it was a great job to have while you're going to school. So, and they did pay, but I couldn't. I didn't get. I took the CPA exam, but I was one of those people who left early. They said anybody leaves early, you're going to do better than them. I was one of the ones that left early. But I didn't major in accounting. I took some accounting courses, but it really did help me get a job in government. Then while I went to school and so on. It was great. It was great to know. Great to have.
And I pursued the accounting. I took enough accounting courses to sit for the exam to get the license. I had already been employed by the Auditor General's office, but I just felt that it would make me, you know, more whole and rounded as an employee of the auditor's office, and make me more marketable, quite frankly. So that's why I pursued the CPA and ultimately got licensed in '94.
Okay. Little background history about the state auditor. As you mentioned, it's changed its name some time ago, but tell us a little bit about the office itself.
Right. The auditor, well, it started out as the Auditor General's office. It was a legislative office at that point in time. We were legislative employees. But it's an office that's been around since 1956. We'll be celebrating our 60th anniversary next year. And it really is an independent, nonpartisan entity that conducts audits of mostly state agencies, but our authority is to audit any publicly created entity. So we can look at special districts. We've done a lot of audits of water districts, school districts, et cetera. And then we certainly have an important element, which is auditing the state's financial statements and issuing an opinion on those statements as well. But the vast majority of the work that we do comes to us from the legislature through an audit committee made up of senators and assembly members, and they can ask the audit, any member of the legislature can come to the audit committee chair and say, I'd like the auditor to take a look at this particular issue. That issue a constituents may have raised, or it may be an issue, IT issues. We've looked at a lot of different IT projects where members have been frustrated with either the project failing or...
News to us, right?
Right. Yeah, a project failing, or just huge cost overruns, and why is this happening? What's wrong with IT procurement in California, with Silicon Valley so close by?
Yeah. Do you have to get approval to do an audit from? I'm like, if some assemblyman comes to you and asks you to look into this, do you have to get approval to do it?
Well,
Or how does that work?
there's two different ways we could do, and you mentioned some of the high-risk IT work that we've done. We have two ways. One is that a member of the legislature would come to the audit committee and say, hey, I have concerns about a particular project.
That's the legislative.
That's
is it
the Joint Legislative Audit Committee,
Right, okay.
right, Assembly members and senators, 7 from each house. So a member can request an audit through that committee. The way that works is the member submits a request, and then my office does an analysis. The committee convenes and decides, yes, this is a worthwhile investment of the resources of the auditor's office. The other aspect that we have that we've really been trying to use more frequently is, to the extent I've met all my statutory responsibilities, any audits we're required to do in statute, like the financial audit, and then we've been able to commence or complete any of the audits the legislature has asked us to do. If I have resources available, I can self-initiate as an agency based on our institutional knowledge. And that's where we've really delved into some of the IT issues. The recent audit we just issued on IT security, cybersecurity, that was something my staff, my IT folks and some of my other staff who have worked on projects said, this is something that we think we need to take a look at, and we have the time to do it, so why don't we dig into this issue?
Okay.
And that's what we've done.
And another thing that's different, we mentioned that my good friend Suzanne Bump, who's the state auditor, I think that is her title, or maybe, state
Yeah,
auditor,
she's a state auditor
in the
in
Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Knew her back when she was in the legislature, and her husband too. But she's elected. But you're not. How do you
Right.
get appointed, and how many states have similar setup as elected or not?
There's quite a few state auditors who are elected, but there are probably a dozen or 15, I don't know exact number of individuals serving in a position comparable to mine that are appointed. I am it's an appointment position. It's a gubernatorial appointment, but the way the process works is the Joint Legislative Audit Committee submits three names and recommends one specific individual to the governor to appoint as the state auditor. When I was first appointed in 2000 by Governor Davis, my predecessor had decided to go private sector and retired from state service, so they did a nationwide search. And the committee did a variety of hearings, et cetera, submitted my name along with 2 others to Governor Davis. I was appointed. It's a 4-year term, but there's an unlimited number of appointments that can happen. I'm in my 4th term, so I've been appointed by 3 different governors, Davis, Schwarzenegger, and most recently Governor Brown a few years ago.
Okay, so you come up again, and
I come up again next fall. In November of 2016 will be the end of my 4th term, so hopefully I get one more.
Hopefully your appearance on Tech Leader TV won't ruin that for you.
I hope not.
So nobody's ever gotten fired after they've been on Tech Leader TV.
Okay,
I
that's
like
good
say
to know.
that.
Okay.
Well, it's
I could be a first.
yeah. There's always could be a first time. You talked about your staff and having the resources to actually do it. So tell us a little bit about your leadership on how your office is organized, and your budget, et cetera.
Sure. Our budget's about $28 million. We have a variety of functions. Clearly, our audit function is the biggest. I don't want to say it's the most important, because we have other functions that are, I think, equally important. My audit staff, I have about 125, 130 auditors broken into 3 different branches, but each branch does a variety. They may do performance audits. There's one branch that does the audits of the financial statements. So we have that group of individuals, professionals. Then we have an investigative function. We're responsible for administering what's called the California Whistleblower Protection Act. It allows anyone to call our hotline or to submit information online about improper activities, illegal activities that are being conducted by state employees or court employees. Our jurisdiction for investigations is a little narrower than our jurisdiction for audits. We have jurisdiction over state employees, court employees. Under the audit side, we could go out and audit a local entity. We wouldn't be able to do a whistleblower investigation of a local government employee. So we have that, and then of course I have my administrative staff, professionals who support audits. We have a legal group. We have about 9 lawyers that assist the audit staff in looking at criteria and assessing issues. So it's the office in total right now is about 175 employees. My budget would allow me to get bigger than that, and I intend to do that. We've been trying to grow a little bit slowly, but my ultimate goal is to get us up to about 225, 230 employees.
Do you, and you utilize consultants, you mentioned sometimes, special talents. Tell us a little bit about that. I imagine in the technology area.
Oh, absolutely. The technology area and other areas as well, but certainly when we conduct IT audits, we don't have the in-house expertise. We certainly have the ability to look at a project and look at project management and understand what the process is supposed to look like according to state rules and regulations and that sort of thing. But we bring in IT experts to assist us in looking at certain reports, like an IV&V report. Or an IPO report, where there are issues that have been raised by those oversight individuals or entities, but we need an IT person to say, okay, how significant is this issue that the IV&V person raised? Is this a major system design issue, or is it not significant? So those IT experts that we hire, consultants, really they become a part of the team and really assist us.
And what procedure do you use to bring in a consultant? Do you have CMAS lists or special?
We will look at CMAS first and foremost. That's the most expeditious way for us to be able to hire a consultant. And in some cases, we've gone out with an RFP for a competitive bid where we're looking for specific expertise. Other types of experts that we've hired are experts in looking at construction, because we've been asked to look at some Caltrans projects. Also, we brought in some annuitants because we were asked to look at pension issues down at the City of San Jose. So variety. So we'll either go through an RFP process, but if someone is on CMAS, that's a much more expeditious way to go, and we try to do that.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about a typical audit scenario, as I call it. You know, like you say earlier, nobody likes to get a knock on their door from the state auditor. But how does an audit proceed when you actually start to confront the target of your affection?
Well, a lot of times the agencies already know. Anytime an audit committee the audit committee convenes to hold a hearing and consider an issue, the agency is notified of that. So they have the opportunity at the hearing, which is the appropriate way to handle the process. So they may appear at the hearing and they already know what the legislature has asked us to look at. So they're not surprised when they get a letter from me saying, as you know, the audit was approved by the committee, we're ready to commence. So then what my staff will do is they'll go out and have some initial meetings with the agency, kind of over, here's the scope of what we were asked to look at, this is what we intend to do, this is how long we think it will take. Our protocols are that staff will be out on site to the extent we can do that. I prefer that my staff be out in the field. There's nothing like, I hate this, even though it's technologically efficient in some ways, I hate auditing by email. I want you out there on site to really get a feel for the environment. So my staff typically will be out on site for several weeks, if not a couple of months in some cases, just interviewing people, looking at records, doing analysis, and then we'll craft a report. But what we'll do with that agency is my staff should be, throughout those 2 months, 3 months we're out in the field, be explaining to the agency, here are the issues that we've identified, this is what we think we're going to publish in our report, we don't want any surprises, we really want to understand your perspective. So that happens throughout the process. Then once we have a draft report, the agency secretary will get a copy of that report and the department to actually officially respond in writing. So they see in writing what we're going to say, what we're going to release publicly. And then they have the opportunity to respond to that and say, we disagree with the auditor, or we agree, and this is how we're going to implement the recommendations. So there's a lot of back and forth and discussion and dialogue with the agencies.
So your product doesn't change even when you give it to, say, the secretary, other than to have their what do you call it? Their
response, right? Their official response. Yeah, the only time there may be a change is if there's more current information that the agency has, and they've already taken corrective action based on some discussions. My staff, we want to give credit for that, and sometimes we'll modify the audit report to include that information in the body of the report, or perhaps in the executive summary, so it's not buried in the back, just in the agency response. But usually, once it goes to the agency, it should be ready to be published, to be put out as a public document.
And the response from the department or the agency is always included?
Absolutely, yes. Audit standards require you to get a response from an agency. It doesn't require you to publish it, but we feel that's the best approach, the most transparent. And I think the agencies appreciate that as well. So their actual literal response will be appended in the back of the audit report, and in a different color, pages, because oftentimes when I go down to the Capitol and I brief members or I'm meeting with staff, they'll look at the executive summary and then they'll go right to the, well, how did the department respond to this? Do they agree with your conclusions? Do they agree with your recommendations? If they disagree, why do they disagree, and what's your perspective on that? So that's a really important element of the audit report.
Yeah. Back to that audit committee, is it like a bipartisan, equal number of, like an ethics committee? A lot of times they have equal number of Democrats and Republicans, or is it standard? Is it a standard type of membership for that committee?
It's democratically, there's seven members, 7 senators, 7 assembly members. It's usually the majority party has 4 seats, and then the minority party has 3 from each side. But you have to have, to get a quorum, you've got to have 4 from each house, and then for any audit to get approved, you have to have, a total of 8 votes. You've got to get more than a majority, and it's got to be 4 from each house. You can't have 6 assembly members voting for an audit and 2 senators and get that audit out. You've got to get 4 votes from each side. Yeah, so it's a little more difficult than people.
That's probably
think.
The way it should be.
Absolutely, I think the committee's very effective in looking at the analyses, hearing out what the members' concerns are, because the way a committee hearing works is the member who requested the particular audit will see our analysis ahead of time, so they know what we put a little background material together, an explanation of what we think the issues are, and then we lay out the scope and what we intend to do to answer the questions the member had, or hopefully provide additional information related to a particular issue. The member will present his or her request. Here's my concerns. It's based on my constituents, or an interest group came to me, or it's something I'm passionate about. They present that. I immediately present our analysis. We're both sitting right next to each other, presenting to the committee. And then the committee will ask a lot of questions. They'll allow public comment. They'll ask the department to appear and provide their perspective. And then the committee really is very diligent in their decision making. Sometimes they say, no, we need to hold off. We need to give the department an opportunity to give us more information, and we'll come back to the next scheduled audit committee hearing.
I know that one thing that was a challenge when I was CIO. Was finding legislators that are really interested in technology. A lot of them will be interested in Silicon Valley technology, but as far as state technology, a lot of them didn't want to get their hands dirty. Deborah Bowen was like the only one I ever knew.
Oh, she was outstanding.
I don't know what happened. There's something in the water over the Secretary of State's office, because that certainly changed when she got over there. But do you find some of these folks in the legislature that are particularly interested in the technology? Are they on this audit committee, or are they different in different sections of the
Actually, there are some members. I mean, we did see a change with term limits when members understood under the old term limits, when they were in the assembly for 6 years and they were out, so they didn't have a lot of time to really develop the institutional knowledge. And with the turnover that occurred because of term limits, there were a lot of members who were just trying to find their way. But now, with term limits having shifted back to not the way they were before, but a member can be in a particular house for 12 years.
12 years, right.
I've seen it over the last 2 years, a lot of members really wanting to dig deep into issues because they know they have the time to do it.
Right.
And there are some members. The vice chair of the audit committee, Senator Roth, was very interested in the BREEZE project, had some oversight hearings related to that. So there are members. There's an audit request that was approved at the recent August hearing to look at a Calvet IT system that seems to really be struggling, and that was Assemblymember Irwin, who's actually carrying some legislation related to cybersecurity and tightening up controls. Assemblymember Nazarian was the co-requester on that audit. And Mr. Nazarian is on the audit committee. So there are members who are really starting to find their issues that they're passionate about, and there are some who are very interested in it.
That's good, because I always like to point out, it's very difficult to find out this information. We may get to that in a minute, but I mean, you look at the state of California, how much they currently, how much they currently spend each year on technology, and they say between $3 and $5 billion. You don't even really know. Unfortunately, still, it was the case when I was there too. Well, let's talk about some of your projects. The first one you mentioned, cybersecurity. Why don't we start off with the Department of Technology, though? That was also a recent report, and basically it talks about the challenges in overseeing the projects, and the findings in there. I think there were issues about conflicting roles and guidance, et cetera. What was the bottom line on that?
Sure, that was a report that we issued, and it was under our high-risk program, so it was something we self-initiated as an office. We issued that report in March of this year, and that was really trying to look at the overall execution. There are various phases, as we all know, with respect to IT projects. We wanted to look at execution because that seemed to be continues to be an issue where we've done our planning, we've decided how we want to design the system, or we've decided as an agency that we're going to use an off-the-shelf system and modify it. And then when we get into execution, we start running into problems. So that audit really did look at a series of projects historically that we've looked at, but also really wanted to understand the process and Caltech's role in IT oversight in California. And you're right, one of the issues we identified in the report is that Caltech seems to be struggling with its role. Is it primarily an oversight entity that is reviewing projects and approving certain things and saying, no, stop the presses, we're going way over budget here, we need to take a time out? Or are they more of a coach and a mentor? And we talked about that in the audit report, where they have some analysts, these IPOs, the project oversight analysts, who are really struggling with, I want this to be a successful project because that's going to benefit California, but I know it's problematic. What do I elevate to Mr. Ramos or others at the executive level at Caltech to say, this is significant enough where we need to suspend this project, or we need to just terminate this project because it's just not getting better? And what our report talks about is that struggle, that's one of the issues we identified in the report, the struggle Caltech seems to have. Now, I had my attorneys look at their statutory authority, because that was a question the legislature had. Do they have enough statutory authority to go in and say, Department of Consumer Affairs, this Breeze project is a mess, we need to suspend it? And our analysis of their statutory authority is it seems very clear. They do have the authority to make those kinds of decisions. Certainly need the support of the administration, which I think they have. So we also talked about that in that particular report as well, as far as Caltech's role in IT project management and oversight of projects.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is, because I remember when I actually terminated the excuse me, I terminated the SACS projects, the child support project, at personal and professional peril, I was told.
Oh, I'm sure.
It turned out to be true down the road. That's a different story. But yeah, it is, you do have the authority, but there's a lot of reasons that people are pushing. In fact, all the way up to the governor's office sometimes about do you really want this project to stop or not. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's very true. And I think Caltech does try to go through a very reasoned process, but with the investment, we talk in that report back in February when we were finishing up that report, on Caltech's website there were 45 IT projects. Those projects totaled, I think, $4 or $5 billion, and 6 or 7 of those projects that were $500 million were in trouble based on their dashboard. So it's a huge investment of the taxpayer dollars as far as these projects. So we've got to make sure that we're doing the right thing. And sometimes it is difficult to pull the plug and make a decision.
Well, the Breeze project was a good example of
absolutely.
that,
right?
I think you issued a report on that, the licensing system over there.
Right, absolutely. That was a project that there were members of the legislature. It was brought to their attention by actually the Registered Nursing Board, because the Breeze project was intended to be an IT project where anyone who is a professional, like a nurse or an accountant, can go online to their respective board or bureau to renew their license or to get licensed. The concern with registered nursing was there were nursing graduates who were having difficulty going online and getting their license so that they could compete for jobs. And what happened with the Breeze project is there was not very good planning up front. There was not a lot of communication between the Department of Consumer Affairs, we found, and these regulatory entities. And the legislature stepped in when they found out this project was intended to be a $28 million project. It was already up to $96 million. It was intended to have 37 entities. They only had rolled it out to 8, and the $96 million would have allowed them to roll it out to another 10. So less than half of the entities would have been using this system at 3 times the cost. Plus, the entities we spoke to during the course of the audit said, it really hasn't helped us with our efficiency. We interviewed 10 executive officers who either had already implemented or were in the process of implementing, and their staff were saying this is really problematic, and the nursing board was certainly one of those entities.
And what finally happened to that? Did they stop that project? Or is it still,
well,
still
what
going
has
on?
happened is that they've modified the contract because that was another issue that we've had, not just in that one, but with some other IT projects that we've audited, is the state's contracting, negotiating. We've really taken on too much of the risk. We believe it needs to be shared risk with a particular vendor. And in that case, the vendor negotiated with Consumer Affairs and Department of General Services, and we really took on too much risk. My understanding of the status of that project is they're going to finish rolling it out to the 18. They don't know what they're going to do with the other 19. They may have to design a similar system or go back to square one. But that's the last information that I have.
Well, let's jump over to that other one. This is kind of the 800-pound gorilla, if you ask me, and that's that information security, cybersecurity audit, which is really the most recent one, I think, on technology. And I was just shocked at it. I think you found that 95% of the departments you looked at were non-compliant with the department, with Caltech's regulations.
Right. Right. We surveyed over 100 agencies, a little over 100 agencies. About 77, 78 agencies responded to our survey. And we found that, I think it was 71 out of 77 said, no, we are not compliant with all of the standards. Many of those had certified, because agencies are required to self-certify to Caltech, that they are complying with all of the standards that are in the state manual and regulations and et cetera. And I can't remember the number, but a huge number of those that had told Caltech, yeah, we're compliant, told us, no, we're not. The reason there was a distinction, though, and the members of the legislature were really concerned about that, when we looked at the tool Caltech uses, it's really kind of rolled up. It's a high level, and it's a yes or no. Am I fully compliant or I'm not? What our questionnaire, our survey, was much more comprehensive. We listed every single standard, and there are many. There's over 60 standards. And then we gave them the opportunity. Do you feel like you're fully compliant? Are you almost there? Or have you not even addressed this particular security issue? And I think that's why our numbers came out quite different. But it was stunning to see the number of agencies that are not fully compliant with the IT security standards.
You know, that's the shot, and the chaser is some of them said they wouldn't be compliant till 2020.
Right. We asked them a follow-up question. If you aren't fully compliant, when do you think you will be? And there were at least 8 agencies that said it wouldn't be till 2020. There were more than 20 that said it would be at least another 3 or 4 years to be compliant.
Well, this kind of gets into your recommendations and what I know you're. I told you that I'm on an advisory board of the U.S. Government Accountability Office, USGAO, and they are an arm of Congress and do investigations and audits for congressional under congressional authority. But there's always the issue of, hey, we made these recommendations, we gave them 20 recommendations, 17 of them are still out. How do you work with that?
We actually have a process similar to GAO's is a little different, but what we do is when we issue the recommendations, again, as we discussed earlier, the agency sees those before we publish the report. They see a draft copy, so they know what we're recommending. The other thing we do in our recommendations is we put a specific time frame. We expect you to have this done by June of 2016 or by December of 2016. That gives them the opportunity when it's in draft to say, oh, that's unrealistic, we need more time, or yeah, we think we can do that. That's a good tool for the legislature because my office doesn't have enforcement authority. I can't force Caltech or Consumer Affairs or anyone else to implement the recommendations we make. But the partnership we have with the legislature is able to hold those agencies accountable because during budget hearings, oftentimes I'll testify or my staff will testify on an audit report. Elaine, you issued an audit report on the Breeze project last year. It's been a year. Have they fully implemented recommendations? If they haven't, then they're going to turn to Consumer Affairs and say, why haven't you done this? So there is a partnership with the legislature, but we have a follow-up process. We issue a report. They have the initial response they provide that's published with it, then 60 days, 6 months, and 1 year. And then anything after a year that has not been fully implemented, if that report's been out for a year, we now create a special report under statutory requirement where we highlight all the departments that have had a year and have still not implemented recommendations that we've made. And that really has captured the attention of the legislature, because then you're kind of in the spotlight as an agency. And that's a tool that we understand from legislative staff and members they use quite frequently.
You know, it's interesting. When I first started to do a little research on the show, I came up with that one report. It's the report that was titled "State Needs to Re-Engineer Its Management of Information Technology," and that was from December of 1994.
Right.
So 22 years later, half a dozen state CIOs later, including me, but there has been a major change in the office. When I started, I had 15 staff. Now, the Department of Technology has probably over 1,000 since it's got the big, major data centers, et cetera. It has a lot more, a lot bigger. But nobody wanted to talk to me when I was CIO because I was like you. I didn't have any money. But I did have a budget approval, which was a pretty big stick to have, and I could stop a project with under some constraints. So, what if you could change three things about the management of state IT, what would you do?
Well, I think
I'll start off with the state CIO's office reporting to the governor or not.
Yeah, and that was an issue that we talked about in some other reports. We were surprised, and with all due respect to Governor Brown, that the department, it's essentially a department. It used to be an agency-level position, a member of the governor's cabinet. I do understand that Mr. Ramos does report to the governor's office, but majority of the time reports up through agency. As far as that's concerned, the stature of the agency, and it's an issue we discussed in that March report, where departments may not necessarily view Caltech as having the authority to actually have, well, you're just another department director, just like me. So I don't know that we necessarily have to listen to what you're telling us, Caltech. And we disagree with that. We think Caltech has the authority and the responsibility, but certainly, in my view, if they were at an agency level, and had that stature, there might be a different perspective. But I also think that Caltech, and we've made this recommendation in more than one report, needs to be very clear when an agency is pursuing a project and they submit a feasibility study to Caltech to review and approve. Caltech lays out expectations and lays out, this is how we're going to oversee this project, and if we're not happy with what you're doing as far as clearing IV&V issues or clearing IPO issues, we may suspend this project, or we may, put it on hold at least, and expect you to do some kind of remediation plan. So Caltech still has the authority, even though they're at a department level, to exercise more authority than I think they're doing at this point in time.
Anything else?
As far as procurement, I know I've heard from the private sector community, and Mr. Ramos served on a committee a year or so ago that put out a report that really talked about the procurement process and how lengthy it can be. And there's got to be a way the state of California can streamline that for IT projects and not necessarily have to follow all those same protocols. We certainly want to have protections in place, but I think that process takes so long that in some cases, by the time you get through the procurement process, the technology has changed. So that's a problem.
We had the CIO, Brenda Fleming, from the Board of Equalization, along with Eric Steen, who's the project manager for the CROSS project.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
It's like the EDR project over at FTV, a tax modernization.
Oh, okay.
They just came out, they just postponed the procurement itself is going to take 4 years when it's done. 4 years.
Yeah, and that it just doesn't work. For technology projects.
Yeah.
Really
well, there's a new process. You have to change. Can't say FSRs anymore. It's now this project approval lifecycle, PAL. You'll probably be looking at it. It's in stages of implementation now, but it's changing a lot of it. And at least on paper, it looks like a very good. Getting the information up front, requirements analysis, making the business case. A lot of times that things weren't done. And as you know, I remember. This is a good segue into another. We talked about. Remember the private sector advisory boards? There used to be a governor's advisory council on IT when I was CIO. In fact, it was mandated under SB2. An interesting group of non-state CIO types, and we had them from private sector organizations, from colleges, from that kind of thing, from local governments. I think CIO from LA was a member of it. Very influential group to use when I was CIO, because they could take the bad cop role sometimes. When I did, I was just a little department,
Yeah.
So it became very helpful to me. That's one of the things I think would be very, very helpful. We just have a few minutes left. There was a couple things I really... Fiscal project, I mean, that's up to $700 million.
Right.
And that's in progress. And that's one of your high-risk audit.
Right.
isn't
We
it?
actually were written into legislation to require us to monitor fiscal, and we have. We are required to put out a report every January at a minimum, and some years we've put out a couple. We keep them short letter reports. One of the issues we've identified on fiscal that is an issue that we've talked about in some of our other high-risk reports, the one I mentioned that we issued in March. One of the struggles and challenges that Caltech has, and I think the state as a whole has, as far as being able to keep talented IT people because of the pay, and when they get some experience with the state, the private sector steals them, and you can't blame people for taking advantage of opportunities. On the fiscal project in particular, there's been a lot of turnover at the executive level. The project executive has turned over multiple times over the time.
When Jeff Ueda just retired.
And all very talented people, but moved on to other opportunities, and that really causes, a difficulty for a project because there isn't that continuity at that executive level to really understand this is a vision for this project and this is where we need to get it to be.
Especially as massive a project as that is. When I came here, and I took my first look at CalSTARS, which fiscal will replace, the state's basically financial system. I mean, it was worthless. I mean, you couldn't. That's why you don't know how much to spend on IT. I'm just worried that fiscal is coming along and they're going to still have the problems. Are they going to have a cost accounting system that tracks IT spending? Because having to estimate it and you're off by $1 billion, that's kind of scary. Fiscal could change that. It could be remarkably transparency, which the state obviously needs.
Right. It's being rolled out in various waves, and they've had their challenges with that particular project.
As they would with that. That's a tough one.
Huge
It touches every area of the state.
Right, and it's not just accounting, it's HR, it's budget, et cetera. I mean, it will be a fabulous tool if the state is successful in rolling it out.
Just a minute or two left here. Upcoming audits. You spoofed me on, scooped me with the VETS, Enterprise-Wide Veterans Home Information System. That's one of your audits. What are MMIS? Is that another one that's going to...
Actually, we are looking at CAMUS.
Yeah,
MMIS.
CAMUS.
Yeah, it's California MMIS. That's another one that we were written into the legislation to monitor. So we monitor that project similar to the way we monitor fiscal. The CalVet project, again, came to us from a couple of members of the legislature. Ms. Irwin and Mr. Nazarian were very concerned about that project. Nazarian serves on the VETS committee, and Ms. Irwin is on a cybersecurity committee for the state legislature, and they both are very concerned about what they were hearing from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So they came to the audit committee just a few weeks ago and asked us to commence an audit on that project to figure out where it's at, because that one, it's my understanding, has kind of taken a time out, but it's way over budget, it's not working, so we'll be commencing that audit and hopefully issuing it in the spring.
Well, you're about the Lord's work, Elaine, I must say that, and it's been wonderful having you on your program. I'm sure our audience really enjoyed it. Learned a lot more. There's going to be a quiz about this at lunchtime afterwards, but that's going to wrap up our show for today. I'm glad everybody could join us. We're particularly thankful to the State Auditor for being here, and we'll have some of the more provocative issues come up during our reception afterwards. And of course, please join us next month. The CIO from CalPERS will be joining us. And we're looking forward to, we've invited Carlos Ramos and his new Chief Deputy, Chris Cruz, to be on the show, close out the year. Hope we'll have them on. And check our website out for provocative and newsworthy stories, and please give us ideas on topics and guests, etc. We really answer every one of your emails. So thank you very much. Good to see you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.